What if the most respected pilots of the Second World War told you some films got it right? The roar of engines, the smell of fuel, the panic of a sky on fire. The Battle of Britain was more than a fight for air supremacy. It was survival. Some films turned that terror into truth. These are the 15 Battle of Britain films pilots still respect. Number 15. Angels. 1/5/1952. It was not a loud blockbuster. It was quiet, gritty, and shockingly authentic. Angels 1/5 came before the glossy war epics. It was made when real pilots were still alive to advise the filmmakers. The story followed a young squadron officer learning the hard truth of air combat. There were no heroes, only exhausted men trying not to die. The film's realism was its weapon. Every plane you saw on screen was real. The dialogue came from veterans who flew those missions. The RAF even lent authentic Spitfires and operations rooms to the production. Critics admired its restraint. The Daily Express called it the most convincing British war picture ever made. But here's the twist. The Air Ministry nearly blocked its release. Officials feared it revealed too much about command procedures still in use. It exposed the confusion of radar control and the cost of mistakes. For a film made just 7 years after the war, that was dangerous honesty. Angels 1/5 survived censorship and became required viewing in RAF briefings for years. Pilots respected its quiet truth, not a celebration, but a memory carved in propeller smoke and fear. Number 14. Reach for the Sky. 1956. Some war films inspire admiration. This one inspired enlistment. Reach for the Sky told the story of real-life pilot Douglas Bader, who lost both legs in an accident, then returned to fly Spitfires in the Battle of Britain. It was a box office triumph across Britain, but behind its uplifting tone lay fierce debate. Bader's stubbornness made him a legend and a problem. The RAF loved his courage, but not his defiance. When the film went into production, officials tried to soften his edges. They asked the filmmakers to tone down his arrogance. They refused. Kenneth More portrayed Bader as both heroic and infuriating. The result felt human. Yet some veterans called the film propaganda. They claimed it simplified the chaos of air war into one man's triumph. Others said it gave civilians false hope about survival rates. Bader himself hated some parts, calling it sentimental. Still, the film left an emotional mark. Young men wrote letters to enlist after seeing it. Families found pride in its defiance. The legacy endures in RAF museums, where real pilots still quote its closing line about never giving up. Reach for the Sky was not flawless, but it captured the unbreakable spine of those who refused to quit even when their wings were gone. Number 13. Battle of Britain. 1969. This was not just a film. It was an air armada reborn. The producers gathered over 100 Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Messerschmitts to recreate the largest aerial battle ever filmed. Battle of Britain was meant to be definitive, lavish, epic, yet its realism nearly destroyed the production. Filmed across Europe, it involved real pilots, military advisors, and even Luftwaffe veterans. Dogfights were filmed in the actual skies of southern England, where the real battle raged, but every cloud carried tension. Spanish dictator Franco allowed filming with ex-German aircraft but insisted no scene make Spain look complicit. Political deals were struck mid-air. The cast included Laurence Olivier as Air Chief Marshal Dowding. His portrayal brought weary dignity, yet critics were divided. Some hailed it as an authentic masterpiece. Others found it too documentary-like. American distributors cut scenes for pacing, ruining historical flow. During release in 1969, audiences were uneasy about war nostalgia during Vietnam. It underperformed, but pilots never forgot it. Many said the film came closest to capturing the sound, the vibration, the sight of combat. Decades later, restored footage revealed breathtaking aerial realism, unmatched even by modern CGI. Today, the Battle of Britain is studied by aviation historians and screened at air shows. Pilots still nod in respect. They say it looked like their memories sounded. Number 12. The One That Got Away. 1957. It was one of the strangest Battle of Britain films ever made because it followed the enemy. The One That Got Away told the real story of Luftwaffe pilot Franz von Vera, the only German airman to escape from captivity in Britain and return to his homeland. Most expected outrage. Instead, the film earned the respect of both sides of the war. Hardy Kruger played Vera with restrained confidence. He was no villain, just a man obsessed with survival. The film showed his capture after a dogfight over Kent, his time as a prisoner, and his daring escapes across Scotland and Canada. What shocked audiences was its empathy. It treated the German pilot not as evil, but as a soldier caught in a system. British officials debated banning it. Some veterans called it treason to glorify an enemy pilot. Others, especially RAF veterans, defended it. They said it reminded them that courage existed on both sides of the sky. The Air Ministry reluctantly supported its release, fearing censorship would make it even more popular. Behind the scenes, the production faced chaos. Authentic aircraft were difficult to find, and Kruger, a real German veteran, felt haunted by playing a Nazi pilot again. Yet his performance broke boundaries, turning the film into a subtle message about reconciliation. Today, pilots still talk about its honesty. It dared to show that courage had no nationality. For them, The One That Got Away wasn't betrayal. It was truth through enemy eyes. Number 11, Piece of Cake, 1988. It came decades after the war, not as a film, but as a British television miniseries that felt more authentic than most cinema epics. Piece of Cake followed a fictional RAF squadron from the calm of pre-war France to the inferno of the Battle of Britain. It shocked audiences by refusing to glorify war. The pilots in Piece of Cake weren't clean-cut heroes, they were flawed, reckless, sometimes cruel. The dialogue was blunt, the flying sequences terrifyingly real. The series used actual Spitfires and meticulous choreography that had modern RAF officers nodding in approval. It captured the exhaustion of endless sorties and the toll on friendships torn apart by death and pride. Controversy followed immediately. Some veterans claimed it insulted the memory of the RAF. Others praised it for finally telling the truth. The BBC was bombarded with complaints, yet the series gained a cult following among younger pilots who said it looked and felt closer to the truth than any textbook. Behind the scenes, filming was chaotic. One Spitfire nearly crashed during a low-altitude sequence, and production insurance nearly collapsed. But the realism was undeniable. Even pilots from the modern RAF said the camera work and tone perfectly captured the lonely terror of waiting for radar to call your squadron into the air. Piece of Cake didn't make war glamorous, it made it human. That's why pilots respected it. It told their story stripped of medals, myths, and morale speeches. Number 10. Dark Blue World, 2001. A forgotten masterpiece from the Czech Republic. Dark Blue World told the story of Czech pilots who escaped Nazi occupation to fly with the RAF during the Battle of Britain. It was both a war film and a tragedy about loyalty, love, and betrayal. When it premiered, veterans called it one of the most emotionally accurate depictions of flying in British service. The film followed two Czech friends who become RAF pilots fighting heroically while facing suspicion from British officers. The aerial combat scenes were stunning real aircraft combined with practical effects that rivaled Hollywood budgets. Yet the film's heart lay in what happened after the war. When the pilots returned home, they were imprisoned by the communist regime as traitors. This brutal twist mirrored real history. Many real Czech veterans were indeed persecuted after returning home from Britain. For decades, their stories were erased from official memory. Dark Blue World restored them with beauty and rage. Behind the camera, director Jan Zverak fought financial and political obstacles to finish the film. British and Czech air forces collaborated to lend surviving aircraft. Some scenes used footage from the 1969 Battle of Britain film blended seamlessly with new material. When RAF veterans saw it, they wept. It wasn't just about victory, it was about the cost of loyalty and what happens when freedom turns its back on its heroes. For pilots, Dark Blue World proved that truth sometimes hides in the films no one talks about. Number 9. First of the Few, 1942. Made in the middle of the war itself, First of the Few was both tribute and warning. It told the story of R.J. Mitchell, the brilliant designer of the Spitfire, who fought failing health to give Britain its deadliest weapon in the sky. Directed by and starring Leslie Howard, the film became more than entertainment. It was wartime faith pressed onto film stock. It opened to packed theaters across Britain. Audiences cheered the birth of the Spitfire as if it were a national anthem. Yet there was something haunting behind its triumph. Howard shot real airfields and borrowed authentic RAF machinery while bombs still fell nearby. The film was part documentary, part prayer. Its controversy was not artistic but political. German intelligence reportedly targeted Leslie Howard after the film's release, believing his work helped RAF morale. In 1943, his civilian plane was shot down over the Bay of Biscay. Many still whisper it was revenge. The production faced shortages of fuel sets and film stock. Yet Howard insisted on accuracy. Engineers who worked with Mitchell were consulted on every scene. The final flight sequence used real pilots from the front line. When they took off for filming, some never returned. Today, pilots call it sacred. They say it captured not battle, but the reason for battle. The courage to build before the courage to fly. First of the Few remains a living memory of a war still being fought in the skies above the camera. Number 8. The Dam Busters. 1955. While not strictly a Battle of Britain story, it remains inseparable from RAF legend. The Dam Busters celebrated Operation Chastise, the daring low-level raid on German dams that tested the limits of engineering and bravery. To pilots, it became a symbol of perfection. Under pressure, the spiritual continuation of the Battle of Britain's defiance. The film followed Wing Commander Guy Gibson and his team as they trained with the experimental bouncing bomb. The flying sequences were tense and mathematical, every maneuver measured by death or success. It was shot using real Lancasters and RAF crews who treated it like a mission rather than a movie. Controversy shadowed its release. The government feared it revealed classified technology still in use. Certain dialogue was edited to avoid showing real bomb designs. Even the bomb itself was recreated in secrecy. Critics complained it glorified destruction, but veterans defended it fiercely, saying it finally showed the precision and cost of modern air warfare. Behind the scenes, it was chaos. Cameras froze in night air. Crews got frostbite during long outdoor takes, yet the final result felt effortless. The music, the roar of engines, the code words that every pilot knew by heart. Pilots still respect it because it shows obsession, discipline, and tragedy in equal measure. The Dam Busters is not nostalgia. It is procedure turned into poetry. Number 7. A Gathering of Eagles. 1960. 3. Hollywood rarely understood the RAF spirit, but A Gathering of Eagles came close. Though set in the Cold War, its core was born from the lessons of the Battle of Britain. The story followed an American bomber group commander obsessed with perfection, inspired by British discipline and sacrifice during the earlier war. The film starred Rock Hudson as the demanding leader pushing his squadron to exhaustion to achieve impossible readiness. What made it special was its consultation with RAF and USAF veterans. They insisted on showing the link between the Eagle squadrons of the Second World War and modern jet aviators. Critics were confused. Some saw it as militaristic. Others found it emotionally empty. But pilots understood. They recognized the tension between duty and compassion, between command and conscience. Hudson trained with real officers to mimic their posture and flight habits. Behind the scenes, cooperation between the Royal Air Force and United States Air Force was delicate. Both wanted to control the image of modern air command. Some sequences were filmed at RAF bases where the ghosts of Spitfires still seemed to linger. The controversy came when early drafts included flashbacks to Battle of Britain scenes that the Pentagon demanded removed to focus on Cold War context. Yet that spirit of the 1940s remained. Veterans said it captured the psychological weight of leadership, the loneliness of those who must send men to die. A Gathering of Eagles endures because it reminds viewers that every commander carries echoes of the Battle of Britain. The war may have ended. The discipline never did. Number 6. Hurricane, 2018. It arrived quietly, but the impact was thunderous among pilots. Hurricane told the story of the Polish 303 Squadron, the overlooked heroes who became one of the most lethal RAF units during the Battle of Britain. For decades, their contribution was footnoted. This film brought it roaring back with grit, speed, and heartbreaking honesty. It followed Jan Zumbach and his fellow Polish pilots as they arrived in Britain, desperate, grieving, and underestimated. They barely spoke English. They had lost their homeland. Many British officers doubted they could adapt to RAF discipline. But when the Hurricanes took off, the doubts died instantly. The film captures that transformation with blistering realism, tight cockpit shots, frantic comms, and aerial sequences that feel ripped from combat footage. Controversy rose fast. Some critics called the film too raw, too nationalistic. Others said it showed the RAF as unprepared and hostile toward foreign volunteers. Yet veterans stepped forward to defend it, saying the film finally told the truth, that 303 Squadron fought with unmatched fury because they had nothing left to lose. Real pilots confirmed that the dogfights, fast, brutal, chaotic, were some of the closest ever put on screen. Behind the scenes, the production battled winter storms, grounded aircraft, and limited flight hours. Several real Hurricanes were used, their engines shaking the cameras with authentic vibration. Historians guided every detail from flight paths to the exhausted slumps pilots carried back to the mess hall. Pilots respect Hurricane not because it flatters legends, but because it restores one. It reminds the world that victory in 1940 was not only British, it was shared by men who fought with a fury born from ashes and exile. Number 5. The Way to the Stars, 1945. Released before the war was even over, The Way to the Stars became a haunting farewell to those who never returned. It focused on the lives of pilots stationed in an RAF base in southern England, showing how war eroded love, friendship, and hope one sortie at a time. There were no victory parades, only quiet endurance. James Mason and Michael Redgrave led the cast with fragile humanity. They portrayed men who hid terror behind dry humor and duty. The dialogue was minimal yet powerful. Each takeoff felt like a funeral. Critics called it too slow, but veterans saw their own reflection in it. It faced censorship from both the Air Ministry and the American distributors. Officials feared it was too melancholy for morale. Some scenes showing pilot funerals and breakdowns were removed from U.S. prints. British audiences, however, embraced it. They were ready to see truth, not propaganda. Filming took place at actual RAF stations still in use. Many extras were real airmen on leave between missions. One of them was later killed in action, his image surviving only in a brief background shot. That tragic reality made the film sacred among flyers. Pilots respected it because it dared to show silence instead of triumph. The Way to the Stars became a cinematic memorial for a generation who lived minutes from death yet found meaning in duty. Number 4. Cold Blue, 2018. You wouldn't expect a modern restoration to feel more authentic than films made near the war itself, but the Cold Blue changed everything. Built from newly discovered original color footage shot during 1943 combat missions, it transported audiences straight into the freezing, oxygen-starved hell faced by American and British air crews operating beside RAF Bomber Command. For pilots, it wasn't just a documentary, it was a resurrection of ghosts. The film's foundation was footage captured by Hollywood director William Wyler while embedded with the 8th Air Force. His team shot real B-17 missions over Europe, cameras rattling inside open bomb bays, lenses frosting over at 25,000 feet, and film cans nearly lost when aircraft limped home on failing engines. For decades, most of that footage was forgotten in archives. The Cold Blue rebuilt it frame by frame, revealing details pilots thought they'd never see again: the silver sheen of flak bursts, the shudder of cold metal, the way fear lived in the eyes of young men wearing frostbitten masks. Controversy came quietly. Some critics argued it glorified strategic bombing, but veterans rejected that claim instantly. They said the film finally showed the unbearable cost: the shaking hands, the burnt paint on returning aircraft, the sudden empty seats at mess tables. Wyler's own cinematographer died filming one of those missions. The documentary includes his final images. To modern pilots, the Cold Blue became a masterclass in emotional accuracy. It captured not tactics, but truth, the loneliness of high-altitude combat, and the quiet bravery required just to take off. For many, it stands as the closest any film has come to showing what the sky felt like when survival was measured in seconds and silence. Number 3. Malta Story, 1953. Malta's story was not just about the island under siege, it was about the pilots who held the line when the sky itself seemed to collapse. Set during the desperate air battles over Malta in 1942, the film followed a reconnaissance pilot played by Alec Guinness as he photographed enemy convoys while surviving constant bombardment. At first, audiences thought it was propaganda. The British government supported the film because it highlighted Malta's critical role in blocking German supply routes. But what pilots respected was its atmosphere of exhaustion and courage without glamour. Every takeoff looked like suicide, every landing a miracle. Filming was brutal. The crew worked under real heat on the actual island still scarred by war. Locals who had survived the siege acted as extras reliving the terror they once endured. Guinness spoke with real RAF veterans to understand their fear. The sound of engines echoing off stone cliffs became its emotional heartbeat. Censors tried to remove scenes showing civilian casualties and fuel shortages, fearing they would upset post-war audiences. The director resisted. He wanted the world to see the cost of resistance. For pilots, Malta's story stood out because it felt honest. It showed the thin line between survival and sacrifice. They said it was not about heroism, but endurance. The film faded in box office memory, but never in the minds of those who had lived it. It remains the only film that made the sound of a Spitfire feel like both hope and heartbreak. Number 2. 633 Squadron, 1964. When 633 Squadron was released, it was pure thunder. It told of a fictional RAF squadron tasked with destroying a Nazi fuel plant in Norway. The story was simple, but the flying scenes were legendary. The film's technical mastery inspired generations of pilots and even influenced later masterpieces like Star Wars. The RAF cooperated fully, providing aircraft pilots and bases. The low-level flying through mountain valleys was real and terrifying. One camera plane crashed during filming, killing 2 crew members. The dedication of the production made veterans weep. It was as close as cinema had ever come to showing what it felt like to fly into hell. Critics at first dismissed it as simple action, but pilots loved it. They recognized the tactics, the formations, the pre-flight tension. Even the sound design used real engine recordings that shook theater walls. George Lucas later admitted that the Death Star trench run in Star Wars was directly inspired by 633 Squadron's Valley attack. Controversy came from the accuracy debate. Some historians said the mission was impossible. Others revealed it was loosely based on real Allied operations in Norway. None of that mattered to flyers. They said it got the emotion right. Its legacy lives in simulator training footage still used for motivation. Pilots respected 633 Squadron not because it was true in every detail, but because it felt true in spirit. It turned duty into fire and fear into flight. Number 1. Spitfire, 2018. This was not fiction, but pure reverence. Spitfire was a modern documentary told through the eyes of surviving pilots who once filled Britain's skies with defiance. It mixed interviews with breathtaking aerial cinematography showing restored Spitfires soaring again against the sunset. The result was not just history, it was resurrection. The film carried the voices of men and women who had waited decades to be heard. They spoke softly of fear and loss of friends who never came home, and of machines that felt almost alive. The camera lingered on each curve of the aircraft like it was touching memory itself. Critics called it sentimental, but pilots called it sacred. Many said it captured the soul of aviation better than any dramatization ever had. The sound of engines and the sight of aging pilots looking skyward turned audiences silent. During production, the filmmakers fought to record the last remaining combat Spitfires still flying. One engine failed mid-air, forcing an emergency landing that was later included in the film. That moment summed up the entire story of the RAF resilience under pressure. Spitfire became the ultimate memorial. It reminded new generations that courage is not about victory, but about taking off when you know you might not return. Pilots across the world still show it to cadets as the definitive statement of what it meant to stand between freedom and fire. These films are not just entertainment. They are the echoes of engines that once guarded the free world. Each frame still carries smoke and memory from that summer of defiance. Which of these do you think captured the truth of the skies best? Tell us in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more Lost War legends.